Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Today we have with us a very innovative guest, and he goes by the name of Dr. Brian Cohen. He's an anesthesiologist and founding partner at Miami Anesthesia Services. And what he's done with his co-founders is created a platform where providers can get CMEs. Okay, you know what? I'm not giving it its justice, and the interview is going to do a much better job, but let me say it a little differently. Imagine being a provider with something like a podcast and you giving knowledge on this podcast. When providers tune in, simply by tuning in, listening to the episode, and then giving their opinions and what they've learned from that episode, they're able to get CME credits. Imagine being able to provide that service. Now think about this and extrapolate it out to the entire medical sales space, pharmaceutical, medical device, and everything else included. There's a lot of value there. You can already picture it. That is exactly what we're going to be talking about with Dr. Brian Cohen today and his company called CMEfy. It's fascinating, the world we're diving into, what's present, and what the future is about to bring. So as always, thank you for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I really do hope you enjoy part one of this interview. Hello. Hey, Dr. Cohen. How are we doing today?
Good. How are you, Sam?
I'm fantastic. So, I'm going to jump right into it. Why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm Brian Cohen, practicing anesthesiologist, co-founder and administrative chief of my anesthesia company, Miami Anesthesia Services. Also co-founder and chief medical officer of Adaptrack and of CMEfy.
Excellent. So, the big question is, what is CMEfy? So I'm going to ask that. What is CMEfy?
Yes, CMEfy is, we are an engagement platform. We're a learning platform. We are a platform that sits in between hosts, clinicians, industry, and captures insights and rewards with the currency of continuing medical education credits.
Excellent. So, when I first, we met, and then we talked about a little bit about this, and I was kind of fascinated by a service that allows any kind of conversation between a provider and another provider, or a provider and a company, where information is disseminated to be used as CME credits. But I want to believe that the majority of my audience does not know anything about that. So to talk to us a little bit about what that actually means.
Sure. So maybe we'll start with just some of the boring background on continuing medical education credits. Then we'll talk about the fun part of continuing medical education credits. Right. This is one of those industries that is sort of, it's fallen into a pattern based on what we accepted in the past. Continuing medical education credits, just like almost all professional industries, are one of those required aspects of being a physician, being in healthcare, being a practicing clinician, where you're going to have minimum number of requirements required each year, whether it's on a 2-year cycle, 5-year cycle, 10-year cycle. Average is about 20 per year. It's one of those things where we're out in life, we're in our practice, seeing patients. We have different deadlines that exist for state requirements, state licensing, and also for specialties. And you usually get to about that last month or few weeks, and you're like, I've got like 40 credits I need to get done. And it becomes this rapid rush of, where do I find them? How much is this going to cost me? How much time this is going to take? That's one aspect. The other aspect is, in the traditional sense of, there's organized grand rounds, right? We're going to plan out those grand rounds. It's going to take 4, 5, 6 weeks. You get your material, you submit it to the department, they review it. They come back, they tell you what you can and can't say, and eventually you walk away with the link that you can then let your learners click on, sign in on the paper. When they get there, they sit in lunch for an hour and listen,
Right.
and maybe pick something up. And the thought is, that system's a little bit broken in a sense of how we function these days. The responsibilities that are on the plate of practicing clinicians, the time constraints, the attention span, and the rapid change of knowledge and how it is being produced out there. Right. We don't need to rely on like the classic textbook to go back to and learn anymore. We're learning every day. We're learning in every conversation we have. And that's really what we started to lean on. We said, the system, we don't have to continue with this same mentality. We don't have to confine ourselves to a 1 hour grand rounds in order to come away with 1 credit of learning. So as a physician, I can text my buddies from residency and say, hey, what do you guys think about this case? I can stop the surgeon in the hall or chat in the OR about something about learning. I can listen to a podcast on my way to work about some of the advancements in my specialty. I can check out a webinar over lunch. There's so many different ways we are learning these days, and they're in so many different mediums, in so many different time spans. So the idea of CMEfy was, why aren't we getting credit for those learning modes? And that's really what allowed us to evolve into that space.
You're right. There's so much information that's being disseminated now you're right. There's so many different mediums, a podcast, a conversation, but I still want to understand, for the audience, how CMEfy captures this and uses it for CMEs for people. Sure. So give us an example of what that actually looks like.
Sure. So actually what we started with as a company is Adaptrack. Adaptrack is a platform that is ACCME accredited with content and a user experience that produces CME credits. Okay. We built Adaptrack with the sole purpose of creating a positive change in behavior for practicing clinicians to de-risk themselves. This came from historical data from the med-mal world, from burnout data and moral injury and work-life balance, administrative challenges we have with documentation and team-based work. But we couldn't just come and present this in hour-long or 40-slide PowerPoint presentations, because again, my job as the physician voice in this company was to say, guys, we can't right now. we don't have the bandwidth to sit through that right now, but we need to know this information. So tell it to me the way in which my brain works. So I spend my days in the operating room with surgeons. You've got about 20 seconds to get that point across before we move on to the next topic. It's, I love these guys, but it's like talking to toddlers throughout the day, right? It's just hit me with the important stuff and let's keep going. So we challenged ourselves to adopt that as the way in which we were going to communicate this knowledge or material or content to physicians. And so what that meant was we're going to do these micro learnings, and these micro learnings are very short, but they have options to dive deeper onto them and look as to where that content came from. But the key to a micro learning actually generating a significant amount or a half a CME credit is based on the user experience and based on the behavioral economics of how everyone really learns, but sitting in the mindset of the physician is, we want something quick to learn. We're going to track that learning and we're going to tie it to reward. So how are we going to track it? We're going to have you journal on it or just reflect on it. Or what we all do is sit and text, hey, how does this apply to you in your day-to-day? I just give you a small piece of information. Now tell me in your own words, how does this apply to you? How are you going to apply this to your practice? And when you do that, hit save on that reflection and you just got a half a CME credit. So there's the reward. So that user experience, which is actually highly supported by the AMA, who grants the AMA PRA Category 1 CME credits, embraces this reflective learning. And what reflective learning does is not only does it allow us to generate these types of credits, but it captures some really cool data and some really cool insights. And the other principle in which we stand on is that's not our data. That's your data. We are the, what are we now? We're the anti-Meta, the anti-Facebook, the anti-whatever. We don't want your data.
Right.
Because it's yours, but you can use that, or you could share that anonymously with the hosts of the content.
Right.
But it's yours to decide. And so what we found was physicians actually really appreciated this type of content, because we never really learn how not to get sued until we get sued. And by that point, it's kind of too late. But we don't learn how not to burn out until you feel like you're burnt out. And then you kind of don't want to hear how not to burn out, because, you're gone. So we really wanted to get this out in front of the physicians before these happened, and create these behavioral changes based on nudge theory and these micro habits that they come across. And it was very well accepted. Then the challenge became, though, wait a minute, we just gave busy people one more thing to do. Our whole goal was to take away this annoyance or extra task that's on our list of to do, by the end of the year. So kind of where we hit a transition was, I think where all of us hit transitions was in the pandemic, but this transition was when Clubhouse came about. And you were familiar with Clubhouse? You had some fun?
Yeah, very familiar.
So we jumped on Clubhouse when it first came out, and I'm like, oh my God, there's like 400 clinicians sitting in a room together talking about like really good stuff.
Right.
Like these are learning moments. Why can't we bring our learning experience and attach it to these moments and CMEfy these Clubhouse conversations? And that's really where the birthplace of CMEfy was the ability. We built a platform that essentially took a CME accredited library and brought them to the right place at the right time. So now if you're learning, if you have a purpose or a reason to reflect on how what you just learned applies to you or your day-to-day, that process and that reflection can generate CMEs. So essentially, you now gain the ability to CMEfy any of these learning moments. The next challenge became, well, how quickly can we do this? So.
Wow. So I'm trying to get the actual experience for the user. So the provider that's bought into this and said, you know what, I'm going to get my credits through CMEfy. Are they going on the platform to find the information, or are they going to are you giving them a list of information to go to where the CMEfy links might be, or, how do they get access to the information to know that they can CMEfy it and get CME credits?
Yeah. So there's really two routes, and one of them, if you sort of want an all-you-can-eat, CME buffet, you can use the Adaptrack platform itself. Okay. As a clinician, you sign in with your NPI number that targets the specialty that you practice in and limits the content to really be specific and relevant to what you would want to know about.
Got it.
Where it gets fun is when you're on the side of being a catalyst for some of these conversations, and you actually get a host account on CMEfy. So now, as a physician with a voice, for example, maybe I'm doing a podcast, maybe I'm hosting that Clubhouse room, maybe I just happen to be a guy in my group who likes to talk a lot. I don't know.
Yeah.
I now have the ability to create these links that used to be generated by the CME department. You are able to generate a link within about 30 seconds on CMEfy, and now you can share that link with your learners. So if I'm a practicing clinician, or I'm a colleague of this voice, this physician voice that is hosting a conversation, the way I get CME and the way I engage and find out about this is they are pushing this out, saying, you can learn with me, for free. And by the way, you come away with the CME. And it's tied in very closely to that learning experience. And that was the key. Again, we wanted it to integrate into where the learner was, to give that host the ability to push it out there very easily to share with their colleagues and with the people that are listening and learning with them.
And that was part one with Dr. Brian Cohen. It's again, the future is here. And the things that we're able to do, it's pretty unbelievable. To be able to create CME credits for providers through something like a medium, like a podcast, that's impressive stuff. So for any of those that were listening and you're listening to this episode and you're thinking about entering this world, you want to be in pharmaceutical sales, you want to be in medical device sales, you want to be somewhat connected to this space, and you want to be an individual contributor, then you need to make sure you visit evolveyoursuccess.com and select Attain a Medical Sales Role. And you're going to be prompted to fill out a very short application that's going to give us a little bit about you, and you're going to get to have a conversation with one of the people from our staff here at Evolve Your Success and help you get on the right track to getting the career that you've always wanted to be a part of. Why wait? Maybe you haven't been getting the interviews. Maybe you can't get past that second or third round. Stop waiting for it. Get the help that you deserve and get into this position that you deserve, especially if you know that's something you want to do and it's been a passion for yours for a while. So again, visit evolveyoursuccess.com and select Attain a Medical Sales Role. And for those of you that are listening to this podcast and you're saying to yourself, wow, there are some really innovative things happening out there that are just changing the game as far as what experience my customers get to have when they work with me, then again, visit evolveyoursuccess.com, select Improve Sales Performance. We have programs there, sales training programs that can give you that cutting edge, and also a way to do things like social media selling, where you can create a brand on the LinkedIn platform and really become a voice that invites customers to you. So don't wait for these things. This is the year, still the beginning of the year. You can still make these things happen. Get on it and get on it now. Visit evolveyoursuccess.com. As always, we do our best to bring you guests that have new innovations, changing the game, doing things differently in this space. So make sure you tune in next week for part 2 of this episode. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.